Jeremy was a quiet child, born with a strange gift. His eyes were the first sign. They weren't like other children's. A swirling mixture of colors, shifting and changing, as if something unnatural lived within them. But it wasn't just his eyes that set him apart. From a young age, Jeremy spent hours alone in his room, crayons in hand, drawing. But these weren't the innocent doodles of a child. Jeremy's drawings were of horrific accidents: planes crashing, cars mangled in fiery wrecks, people falling from great heights. They were grotesque, disturbing images, filled with blood and suffering. His mother, Linda, didn't understand it. She would look at his drawings with concern, but Jeremy never explained them. He simply watched her with those strange, shifting eyes. He was an independent boy, rarely seeking the company of others. The neighborhood children stayed away from him, especially after he started predicting their deaths. One day, Linda asked a group of boys why they didn't play with Jeremy. One of them told her that Jeremy had given him a drawing. It showed a plane crashing into a building, and Jeremy had told him he would die by falling from that building. Another boy had been told he'd die in a plane crash. Since then, they had avoided him, terrified of what he might say next. Years passed, but Jeremy never changed. He grew into adulthood, keeping to himself, working at a general store, and living alone in a small, dimly lit house. His mother, Linda, kept her distance too. There was something about her son that filled her with unease, though she couldn't say exactly what it was. Then, tragedy struck. The world watched in horror as a plane crashed into the World Trade Center, killing thousands. Linda, glued to the television, felt a chill creep down her spine as the images of destruction filled the screen. A strange, gnawing fear grew within her. She couldn't explain it, but something about the event felt connected to Jeremy's eerie childhood predictions. She began searching through the lists of the dead, her hands trembling as she scrolled through the names. And then she saw it. The name of the boy who Jeremy had warned all those years ago. The one who was supposed to die by falling out of a building. He was among the victims who had perished in the World Trade Center that day. Her heart pounded in her chest as she kept scrolling. Then, she saw the other name. The boy who was supposed to die in a plane crash. He had been on the flight that slammed into the towers. Linda felt her breath catch in her throat. Jeremy's drawings, his dark predictions, they had come true. Every word he had said to those boys all those years ago had been right. She needed to talk to Jeremy to find out if he had known about this. But when she called, there was no answer. Fear gripped her as she raced to Jeremy's house, driving faster than she ever had before. When she arrived, the house was dark. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, and the silence was suffocating. In the middle of the living room, Jeremy sat alone. His face was emotionless, his strange eyes staring straight ahead. All the lights were turned off, but that wasn't what stopped Linda in her tracks. It was what Jeremy was doing. He sat in the center of a circle drawn on the floor, strange symbols carved into the wood. In his hands, he held something, a small blackened object that pulsed faintly in the darkness. His lips moved silently, mouthing words she couldn't hear, couldn't understand. It was as if he were speaking to something, or someone, unseen. Linda's heart pounded in her chest as the realization sank in. Jeremy wasn't born with a gift. He was born with a curse. The devil lived inside him, twisting his visions, allowing him to see the deaths of others long before they happened. He wasn't predicting their fates. He was creating them. In that moment, Linda knew the truth. Jeremy had always been in contact with something far darker than she had ever imagined. And now, he was beyond saving. The blind fortune teller stood before the nobleman's house, feeling the weight of death in the air. It wasn't just the kind that came from sickness or old age. This was heavier, darker, an unnatural presence that pressed down on the house like a curse. Though he could not see, his sixth sense stirred. Something evil was here. The nobleman's daughter had died, or so they believed. Her body lay cold inside, but the fortune-teller knew better. She wasn't dead. Not yet. He sensed the faint flicker of life buried deep beneath the surface. Without hesitation, he moved into the house, his mind already racing. Time was against him, and he knew the demons inside her would not let go easily. They were vicious, relentless creatures that thrived on suffering. Every second counted. Inside the dimly lit room, the girl's lifeless body was brought to him. Her skin was pale, her eyes closed, but the fortune-teller felt the malevolent energy swirling around her, wrapping tighter with every breath she didn't take. This was no ordinary death. This was possession. He began to work immediately, sealing every entrance to the room. Windows were covered, doors bolted shut, no way for the evil inside to slip out. He knelt beside the girl and began to chant, his words ancient. They were words meant to reach into the darkness, words meant to fight the forces that had taken root inside her. Outside the room, the family waited, their fear growing with every passing second. They could hear the sounds from within, low groans, unsettling whispers, loud, piercing shrieks that cut through the stillness, sending waves of dread through the house. The sound of it made hearts race, hair stand on end. The servants trembled, terrified of what was happening beyond the sealed doors. Inside, the fortune-teller fought with all his strength. His voice did not falter. His chants became louder, more forceful. But the demons fought back. They clawed and writhed within the girl, desperate to stay tethered to the world of the living, a battle of wills taking place in the unseen. But something went wrong. His hands, trembling, reached for the door. He poked a small hole through the paper screen, just enough to see inside. In that single foolish moment, everything unraveled. The barrier was broken. The demons, once contained, found their escape. A sharp wind howled through the house as the evil slipped into the world beyond, freed from its prison. The girl's eyes opened, her chest heaving with life once more. But the room was no longer safe. The fortune-teller knew the danger. He had failed. And now, he would pay the price. They were free, and they would come for him. He refused any reward the family offered, turning away their gratitude. The demons would seek their revenge. Soon after, the king heard of the fortune-teller's failure, convinced that the old man was nothing more than a fraud, preying on the fears of the people. A test was arranged, a simple test. The fortune-teller was asked how many rats lay before him. With calm certainty, he said, 3. But when the king looked down, there was only 1. The king, now convinced of the fortune-teller's deceit, he had the old man sentenced to death. The fortune-teller's head was to be severed, his fate decided by the very demons he had failed to banish. But there was a truth the king hadn't seen. When the rat was cut open, inside it were 2 fetuses, 2 unborn lives. The fortune-teller's words had been true after all, but it was too late. The execution order had been sent, and though the king tried to stop it, fate could not be reversed. As the fortune-teller knelt before the blade, a cold wind swept through the kingdom. The messenger raced to halt the execution, but the wind howled louder, drowning out his voice. The blind man was beheaded. The wind stopped. The world fell into a deafening silence, but not before a final sound filled the air, a chilling, twisted laugh. A laugh that echoed through the streets, carried on the last breath of the fortune-teller's life. It was the demons. They had won. It began with an unsettling visit. Ji-hyun and her best friend Minji, had heard the rumors about a fortune teller in Daegu, a woman known for her terrifying accuracy. The shop was small and unremarkable. As they stepped inside, the air thickened, a strange chill settling over them. The dim glow of a single flickering candle illuminated the cramped space. The fortune teller sat at a small table. Without a word, she gestured for Ji-hyun to sit, shuffled a deck of cards with a deliberate slowness, her gaze darting between the two women. When she finally spoke, her voice was strained. "I will read for you," she said to Ji-hyun. But when Minji moved closer, the fortune teller froze. There was a moment of silence that seemed to stretch on forever before she spoke again, this time with an edge of fear in her voice. "I will not read for your friend. She has no future." The words hung in the air like a curse. Minji's laughter broke the tension, dismissing the fortune teller's warning as a bizarre joke. She waved it off, pulling Ji-hyun toward the door. Outside, the city bustled around them. Yet, as they walked to the car, a heaviness lingered in Ji-hyun's chest. The fortune teller's voice echoed in her mind. Ji-hyun couldn't shake the unease, though Minji seemed unaffected. They drove home that night, rain drumming steadily against the windshield. Minji talked and laughed, but Ji-hyun could barely focus. Something wasn't right. The next morning, the phone call came. On the other end, Minji's mother was sobbing, her voice fractured and panicked. Minji was dead. A car accident. She had lost control on a slippery highway, the vehicle smashing into a guardrail. Ji-hyun's knees buckled, her mind spinning. The fortune teller's words slammed into her thoughts with relentless force. For days, Ji-hyun couldn't sleep. Guilt gnawed at her. Could she have warned Minji? Could she have prevented it? The fortune teller's warning had come true, and now her friend was gone. Ji-hyun felt the weight of it pressing down on her. Weeks later, Ji-hyun found herself standing outside the fortune teller's shop again. The narrow alley felt darker. Her hands shook as she pushed open the door, the familiar creak echoing in the silence. The fortune teller sat in the same spot, her face as unreadable as before. She didn't look up as Ji-hyun approached, didn't acknowledge the grief radiating from her. Instead, the fortune teller's voice drifted through the dim room, calm and emotionless. "I told you," she said softly. "Not all futures should be known."